Good morning. Today is Sunday, September 4th, the Sunday of the Labor Day long weekend. It's good to gather together virtually this morning. This is the final installment of our summer long weekend devotional series. A few notes for our day. First, at 10:30 this morning, you're invited to join the Zoom Room Fellowship at rioterracechurch.org/live. So a few folks from Rio Terrace Church will be there live at 10:30, chit-chatting on our Zoom room. And then at 4 p.m., the ice cream stand will be open, and you're invited for a time of fellowship at the ice cream stand. We have a very exciting fall planned here at Rio Terrace Church. Starting this coming Sunday, September 11th, we will be reviving our Waffle Church, which is very exciting. So Waffle Church will gather each Sunday morning at 9:30, and that's a special time of breakfast and crafts and a story for children and their loved ones. So we do invite you to consider joining our Waffle Church Sunday mornings. And then at 10:30, we have a couple sermon series coming forward. So this coming Sunday, September 11th, we're going to start with the season of creation, and we're going to do some really wild and interesting things in our sanctuary to celebrate the 4-week-long season of creation. I also invite you to look to your This Week at RTC newsletter for information about our upcoming Wild Church services, as well as our book club, which is returning. Speak with Mary and Perrin about that. Finally, next Sunday, September 11th, the Reverend Aaron Linville, pastor of Millwoods Church and familiar to many here, will be consecrated a presbyter. And so if you would like, I certainly will be at Millwoods next Sunday at 3:30 for Aaron's presbyterial consecration. And that will be followed by a picnic hosted by the people of Millwoods. Our devotional today is the speaker Ilia Deo. She is a Franciscan nun. She's written extensively about care for creation and the nature of God, and very modern topics like neurotheology, thinking about how the systems in our bodies interact with spirituality. Well, today, in celebration of Labor Day weekend, she's talking about the labor of God. So what is it that God does? Who is God? You know, a lot to compact into a short 9-minute piece, but I invite you to enjoy this reflection on the labor of God. And I'll give you a hint. It's love.
What's God do?
That's the big question.
Yeah, what's your... yeah.
So you want me to start with that question then?
Sure.
Okay. So the question of God, oh wow. I've been reflecting on this question for a number of years. I mean, probably as long as I've been alive on this earth. And probably everyone who's alive on this earth has also been thinking about the same question, because there's something about that name God that's deeply tied to us. And so I think that's the first thing we have to acknowledge, that there's something about us that has this kind of sense of something that's greater than us, that's more than us, that's beyond us, and yet deeply tied to us, right? The funny thing is, I think when we talk about God, we've objectified this name God, right? So we have this big being, God, and then all sorts of medieval art helped us picture this God as elderly, sort of a nice grandfather in the sky, watching over his children. So right. God is, an elderly grandfather or male. And I think we've had this, again, this image that this grandfather God is keeping a very close eye on what we're doing, and, if we slip up, things are not going to go well with Grandpa in heaven. And I think we've lived two things. I think we've lived very, very narrow lives in relation to this grandfather God. And second, I think we actually think that that's what God is. And, there's a lot of new theology, certainly in the 20th century, as people began to really question. First of all, I take Revelation seriously. So I think we can't have a grandfather God and Jesus Christ in the same breath. I mean, there's something about this name God that's saying something to us in this person of Jesus. And the first thing is that God does not like to sit at home in heaven. God gives God's self away, right? And so that's what, we see in this Jesus, that there's something about this God that kind of breaks our images. I think Jesus was really an iconoclast. He broke the image, certainly of how the Jews conceived of God, And the second thing is that, like Jesus said, like the reign of God is here, like it's now, like this God that you're looking for is right there within you, And that was shocking. I think it's still shocking to us. I really don't think we believe this, that we still have the God up there, in the heavens, distant from us, watching over us. And somehow we can't quite get ourselves to believe that this God has become one of us. There's the good news, and it's scandalous, really, as St. Paul said. This is just really scandalous and just, completely illogical. What kind of God would become one of us? I mean, look at us. We're such a mess, We get things wrong. We're violent. We don't like one another. So why would a nice God who is love enter into a messy world like this? And so I do think, certainly, I think from a Christian perspective, and here I'll speak as a Christian, we have to take the incarnation, Jesus, as the Word of God, really seriously. Like, this is what God is. God's not other than this. God's not greater than this. Like, all that we can say about God really is said in this event. And that's like, what? Seriously? And I'm like, either that or Jesus, or we then follow all the heresies of the early church, was like, well, Jesus really was a good man. He probably was the closest next best thing to God, but he's really not God, which was sort of like what Arius said, or the Gnostics said, there's no way a good God can enter into a messy world. So, just know, knowledge is salvation. Or the Docetists, who said, well, maybe God just appeared in the person of Jesus, but God really wasn't there, And we have all these ideas still floating around today, right? We have the Docetists and the Gnostics and the Arianists. And the Christian says, nope, really, God is one of us. And you think, well, how is that possible? So what does this name God really mean? If God is one of us, then what is God, and then what are we? Those are two questions I think that gives rise to. And I think the way Jesus lived his life as a person of compassion, a person of loving compassion, a person of forgiveness, he really challenged all, the Jewish rituals and the Jewish law. I mean, he did things that were really outside the law. I mean, and I think no one in his own day really understood what he was about, because I do think it's about, I think John 4:13 says, God is love. And I think we have to start there. That God's just not like a big being, like God's not one of us, but bigger than us. God is absolute love.
What's love?
Exactly. What is love? I think love, as Terre Desjardins said, is the greatest mystery in our midst. We fall in love, we talk about love all the time. We haven't a clue of what love is, And yet what Terre said is love is the most unknown and yet the most powerful energy in the world. And we're saying that God is that love. And we can't get our heads around it, right? So the first thing we know about love is, well, it doesn't stay all by itself, right? Love gives itself away. That's what makes it love, right? It goes out of itself to another, and it has an attractive power. It has a desirous power. It has a, I want to give myself to you power, And, again, we can't get our heads around, like, why, do we want to give ourselves to another? But that's exactly, if we trace that why back, that's what God is. God is that self-giving love. And so the name God, first of all, is pointing to this ground of activity or dynamism, which is love. And so love isn't something God does. Love is what God is. So the first thing we have to know is where there's love, there's God. I mean, that's the first thing we can really say.
That's
Second,
dangerous.
huge, right? Huge. Second is like when we say God gives God's self to us in love, first of all, what kind of God could give God's self to love? Well, you have to be kind of personal. It can't be like just an idea of this. I think what we're saying is God is deeply personal because it's persons who love. Even particulars, if you talk about love on a non-human level, it's particular to particular or center to center. And then, so God is personal, God is relational, right? God is not this self-thinking subject, that all locked up. God is actually intrinsically relational. And so the word that we use is Trinity. And again, that's a word that, what is that? 3 persons in one. I mean, who can get their head around that thing, right? And all we're saying is God is a person who is absolute self-giving, what we name as the Father. It's like fountain fullness, this never-ending flow of love. And that, fountain flowness of love is expressed in another type of person that we name Son or Word, and that bond between them is so rich and so deeply personal. It's expressed in a third person that we name as Spirit. And so what we're saying is God is overflowing love, expressive love in a particular other, and lives in the bondedness of that love, in the breath of new life, creativity and newness. And so I think that's what we find all those things in Jesus. We find the overflow of love, we find that expression of love in a particular other, the way he reaches out to the other, and the bond of that love in the richness of creative newness, of future. There's a new community breaking in here, a new unity moving forth. And so, there's several things about the Christian God I actually really like. So I have really put grandfather to sleep, the grandfather God. And I've really begun to really reflect on the God of Jesus, the God of this powerful, unquenchable, unstoppable love.